Hello, everybody. So I did it. I moved, and I have been here for like a week and a half, sort of. I went back to Maryland for my family reunion, and it sucked. But anyway, that's not what I'm posting a video about. This is an ancestor message that, interesting enough, is personal, but it's also informative for other people. So I'm just going to share it. And so when I came down, the first time we took some of my stuff, and my grandma came and one of my aunts to this aunt's house. And the second day that we were here, my aunt was like, oh, I had the aunt that lives here. She was like, I had a dream last night that there was a woman in here laughing and talking with us while we were sharing stories and stuff, like as if she knew us, but I don't know who she was. And I said, oh, I had the same dream, even though I didn't have the same dream. I just knew that that particular ancestor was around us. And I don't know, I almost felt like she was sitting on my neck, like the energy was strong. And not only was she sitting there, it was like they were laughing and talking and everything with us, just like she said. And but I can't directly say that. I have to say I had a dream all the time. But anyway, the only thing is, I asked her who she was, and she told me that she was my grandmother's grandmother. And the personal part is that particular grandmother, her name is Grandma B, or she called herself Mom B or Mom B, her Beatrice. And that she was murdered, actually by my great-grandfather. At the time of the murder, we were people that were like classified as colored, and you just didn't do that much time. So my grandmother was 2 years old when she died, and her father went to jail, and she didn't meet him until she was 12. Right. And so I asked her, what supposedly happened, what everyone says is that my great-grandmom, the one that I talk about all the time, I mean, I've known this about her too. They say that she told him that, he was crazy in love with her, crazy about her, and he told her that they couldn't be together unless he killed her because she wouldn't give their blessing for them to be married, and that in the background, or it was actually a plan between her and her brother to get the insurance money. And she died. He killed her. He shot her. And I asked her, how do you feel about it? Like your death, your daughter doing that to you, your son doing that, all the background. And she said, oh, I'm not mad at her father, talking about my grandmother. She's my great-grandfather. She said, I'm not mad at him. He was just a pawn. And I knew it was coming. And I said, well, if you knew it was coming, then why didn't you do something to stop it? And she said that she didn't do anything to stop it because she was happy to go. And that now that she's on the other side, that she doesn't feel the same way. When the reason why she said like happy to go, she said that she was like under that Christian belief that, you're going to see Jesus if you die. And she was aware that they were planning something and wanted the insurance money. It wasn't the first time that they did something like that or tried to plan something and she found out about it. And she said that she was tired of the evil in the world, especially, coming from her own family members. But she said that she herself, her family, her lineage is not like that, but the man that she married was like that, and that's why they are the way that they, were the way they are, because they're all passed on now. But, and then they get it from their father, and she told me that she thought that she was going to see Jesus. She didn't know that you go to a waiting place, or, the ancestor plane. and that had she known that, she would have stayed longer to protect my grandmother and help raise her. But you can't take things back. But she says that she cares for her and watches over her all the time, all the time. And so since I had, the door open to speak to her, I started to ask her other things like, okay, then, is it true that we weren't never slaves or nothing like that? And she was like, yeah, it's true. What she said is right. Talking about my grandmother, because I asked my grandmother and she said, yeah, that's right. She told me about the land. She told me about the food they used to eat, and that what they don't teach you in school these days or whatever is that, okay, they were living on the Eastern Shore, and there were different tribes, many different tribes with different appearances and aesthetics. Some were shorter, some were taller, some had kinkier hair, some had curly hair, some had wavy hair, and that they're okay. So like, she used the word Aboriginal for us, and she said that the ones that you see on the forefront now when they say the word Native American is that they those people are Asiatics, and they know that they are, and they've known that they were, and they've taken on the identity of natives when they aren't. They actually are Asiatics. They're Asians, and that they migrated there, and that they mix with them. They mix with us. We're not like how people think that we're so 100% African, or that our blood is violated by Europeans through rape or whatever. In slavery, she said, there's truth and then there's truth. There's truth and then there's pieces of truth. And the truth is that there's no pure blood anything. And that, yeah, we were Aboriginals, and yeah, we had brown skin and different hair textures or whatever, but we did mix with those Asians, and we were still, what people consider natives to this land. And that the settlers, the white European settlers, they came, and it's not like people think that we were immediately enslaved that they came and then decided to go to Africa and pull people over to work for them. It wasn't like that. She said that they lived here for years and years in peace, and not necessarily like peace and harmony, like kumbaya, but like they lived in their little area and we lived in our own. And she said that some of the more Asian future tribes were in the West, which of course, where, that used to be part of Mexico before they had that, before the war, for that territory, which would make sense. And that different tribes, even going further down south, they just look different or darker. Duh, we're like in the sun. It's kind of obvious. Versus like if you go to Alaska, obviously natives there are going to look a lot lighter because there's no sunshine. And she said that when she was a little girl, that they owned their land and their property and all of that kind of stuff. And the Africans started to come by force. And she said that they had visited the land previously for trade. And some of them stayed and intermingled. And same thing with Europeans, that they were visiting for trade. It's not like how they just say that Christopher Columbus arrived here and decided to enslave people. Not like that. She said so many different ethnicities, different races, different nationalities, different cultures, people. She said it's like they teach you as if everything was just disconnected, when it's not nearly, the earth wasn't nearly as disconnected as we think it is, or as we think that it was. And that everybody traded amongst each other without a lot of problems. And then she said that even Africans came for trade, the Asians came for trade, Europeans came for trade. When they started coming for religious persecution, that they, asked for land, they traded what they had, and that us, the Aboriginal people, traded with them as well so that they would be able to survive. And we lived in peace for quite some time. And then she said when they started, with this conquering mentality, this warlike mentality, this is our land, y'all move off of it. Some tribes moved, she said, because they didn't want war. They moved west. Some of them fought, some of them stayed, and the ones that stayed, we were amongst people that stayed on the Eastern Shore and the East Coast period. Like, okay, one of the most, you got two like really recognized tribes, the Seminoles in Florida, where it's obvious that they're dark skinned. And then you have, you hear people talk about Blackfeet and Cherokee. They're still recognized by the government. Our particular tribe is not recognized by the government anymore, but she said that's when they started the whole colored idea, because we weren't the only colored people here. They called Asians colored, and they called the indigenous people from Central and South America, they called them colored too, and they lived here as well. And then even the Chinese came here, and they were here for trade as well. And I'm saying China like as a country apart from the other Asians that were there, that were living here. And she said that they when they started that classification of colored, it wasn't just black and white. It was everybody that wasn't them, basically. And that trade became, it disappeared. It was something that they couldn't do anymore. And that people had to trade money. And that's how, if you didn't have any money, that's how they fell into quote unquote slavery, where certain people that were free were started to be classified as slaves. But prior to that, she said that her family worked for white people for money to get things that they could no longer trade for. And that's how, she said, that's how the deception began. That's when they started coming in and saying, you can't just speak your language. Don't think that we just got forced and bam, you need to speak English. She said that those dialects existed here a long time and people continue to speak them. But socialization, the schools, the medical field, religion, that changed all of that. And our culture died out, and that the worst part, she said, that of our culture dying out is that the loss of transference. People stop teaching their children. And you allow the schools to teach your children, and the schools are run by people who are, colonizers, people who are, the way she described it, people who are evil, people who are never at rest. She said those people that came that were warlike, that came with the slaves, and some of the slaves mixed with them. The African, I'm not going to call people slaves. Some of the Africans that came, they mixed with the Aboriginals. They mixed with the Asians that were here. Some of them mixed with the European settlers, and then some of them, obviously, they were raped. But for a long time, there was a separation, because the dialect or language was so different from overseas than what the languages that we spoke here as Aboriginal was, that they couldn't communicate with them too. That's why it took a long time to plan uprisings. And that's something that's kind of not spoke about. When you think of like Brazil and Colombia and the Caribbean, all this other kind of stuff, those people were one people that were sent to a land majority of the time, and they're able to speak to one another and communicate in order to fight back. Whereas here it was extremely mixed. And so there is no pure blood. That's what she was telling me. She also told me that they used to, the corn looked different, and that was our major staple. Beans and greens, those were our major staples. And that meat, they used to use rabbit, deer, squirrel, not chickens, not cows. They used to eat the chicken egg, and they did not eat cows. They used milk. And the bears as well, and that they used to use bear grease. They had different bathing rituals that she was telling me about. I'm not going to talk forever because it was, I mean, we had like a long, lengthy conversation about what life was before they started having to go work for white people for no longer having trade, which she said that the idea of trade stopped around the time that she was, before she became a woman. In other words, she's saying like 11 or 12, before she had a period, basically. That's when, around the time that trade stopped. She didn't give me dates or times. But she says that most importantly, if things are going to change and we're going to become back in control, people have to respect the land and understand the culture of where we come from and all that we lost. Understand the cost of what we've lost, and that the same way I'm communicating with her, other people can communicate with their ancestors and regain our old way of being. And she said that we need to trust them. And a lot of people, she said, it's kind of like this day and age, everybody's so, what's the word, like faddish, like, something's popular for a week and then the next moment you forgot about it. And she's like, no, this is ancient. You have to stick on it. It has to be a part of your daily living. That's what we were taught. And that's what we've lost. Our attention spans, basically. She said it has to be a daily practice. And she said that community, there's a lack of community, and that the men were the hunters and the women were the gatherers, and that we lost that. We lost the right to even feed ourselves and clothe ourselves and shelter ourselves and bathe ourselves, and that when they took on the classification of being colored, when they stopped the trade or, were forced to earn money, that they had no idea of the long-term effects and how it would change us as a people. And she also said, last thing I'm going to say because this video is long, is to buy back the land, get the land back. And she says that there is so much buying power amongst us that we have no excuse not to own the land, and that we can expect their return, that we can expect an uprising to happen and for things to shift in our way. I'm not going to talk in depth about that right now, but some other time, about what she said that's supposed to happen in the future. But that's it for now. Hope y'all have a great day.